within the Faculty of Arts and Science. My role there is as a mental health programs officer. And I guess my background is in health promotion, and the work that I do right now is really thinking about how we support folks within our faculty, staff, as well as our graduate and undergraduate students.
Great, thank you very much, Chad. Andrew?
Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are in Canada. My name is Andrew Zito. I am Director of our Campus Mental Health Strategy at the University of Calgary. I'm also a faculty member within the Department of Psychology. A lot of the work I do on campus is to support both student and faculty mental health and to be collaborative between all these groups on campus. My research on campus is, or in general, is focused on stigma reduction, on mental health programming, post-secondary mental health. So it runs the gamut, related to what we're talking about today.
Great, thank you so much, Andrew. And last but certainly not least, I'll pass it along to Michael.
Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, depends on where you are. This is Michael Lee. I use the pronoun he, him, and his. I am a associate professor of teaching from University of British Columbia, and I'm also the associate head of the occupational therapy program in here as well. My major role is teaching occupational therapy program, and mental health is my major area of interest. In addition to teaching commitment, I'm also very interested in student well-being, and looking at using teaching methods to support student well-being is my area of excitement, honestly.
That's great. Thank you, Michael. And thanks again to all of you, both for being here today, but also being involved in planning that took place to sort of turn this webinar into a reality. I'm now going to pass the microphone back over to Cecilia to provide a brief overview of our faculty toolkit and how it came into being.
So I'm just going to share a little bit, like Chris said, about the faculty toolkit. So the full title of this toolkit is the Mental Health and the Learning Environment. And this toolkit really came about from what we were hearing from our stakeholders. So all of you folks who are tuned in today and many more about how faculty could start to do some of this work, especially given the current circumstances that we're in right now with COVID-19. And we came quickly to the realization that there weren't very many resources out there just as yet. So we decided to work with some of our stakeholders and collaborate to try and build something out to start to support this work. So really what this resource is a resource that aims to share some of the concrete steps that we can take in this collective effort to support student mental health. And this toolkit can be used by a wide variety of folks on campus, so faculty, teaching staff, or administrative staff who are supporting students. And then within this toolkit, there are several sections that take different looks at some of the different parts of this topic. So in the toolkit, we touch on the role of faculty and how they can work to co-create engaging learning environments for students. We also discuss the topic of curriculum design and how it impacts mental health. And then we also provide some tips on recognizing when students might need support, and then also how faculty can seek out supports for their own mental health as well. And then within the appendices of the toolkit, there are a few other additional resources. So we do provide some tips for graduate and teaching assistants around their mental health specifically because of the dual roles that they play on campus. We provide some examples of wellness and mental health courses for those who are interested in seeing how some of these pieces are being applied in practice in the classroom. And then we also give some examples of resources that campuses as a whole can create to help faculty, teaching staff, and administrative staff actually navigate the available mental health resources based on where they're situated. So that kind of sums up what this toolkit is about. So I'll pass it back to you, Chris.
No, thank you very much, Cecilia, and very well said. Way better than I could have said that, that's for sure. So with that being said, the discussion topics that we will be focusing on today are drawn directly from the categorical topics within the toolkit. So I think rather than talking about that at any more length, I'd like to dive right into the discussion. So one of the main themes in our toolkit is talking about this holistic approach to approaching mental health and wellness on the campus environment. So when reading the statement, when it comes to creating a campus environment that prioritizes mental health and wellness, there is a role for everyone to play, and that is advocated in the toolkit. So based on your experiences and your expertise, the first question I have for you is, how do you conceptualize a campus environment that is in fact mentally healthy? And so maybe I'll start with Michael on the first question to lead us off.
Sure. Thank you, Chad. Thank you, Chris.
No problem.
This is a $1 billion question, or even more than $1 billion.
Yeah, I'm starting off with the easy ones.
I think this question can just kind of take up the whole hour if we really want to dive into it. I would say, this is a $1 billion question. This is a very basic, fundamental, but important question for us to think about. I think for me, my very basic fundamental belief in terms of like well-being is we as human beings live and function well in a community context. No matter we are a student, a employee, a parent, or any kind of role. We need to kind of interact with other people, and we need to kind of interact with other people in the community context. And likewise for student and staff and faculty as well. So when I think about like campus well-being, what really draws my attention and think about it is like, how can we create a community amongst all members within that community so that we can actually support each other and enable each other to grow and to mature from there. So to me, it is like an ongoing process, but at the same time, it needs to have like synergetic support from each other so that the growing process can continue and to grow further.
Very well said, and certainly a very philosophical, ground up approach to bring into it. Chad, I'm going to pass it to you to elaborate on what Michael said, but also considering this question based on your specific role in your campus environment, where do you fit into this equation?
Sure. Those two go hand in hand really nicely for me, because when I think about supporting, a mentally well campus, it's more than just focusing on students. Obviously, students are at the core of the work that we do, but thinking about how our support community, our staff, our faculty, our instructors, our postdocs, how all these folks are cared for is part of that equation. And so when we think about what it looks like to embed well-being across a campus, it's not just within the undergraduate experience. And a part of that, I'll say, just to add on to some of Michael's comments, is I completely agree, the responsibility we take for building that care and culture of caring for each other, but that also needs to come top down, that there needs to be an institutional commitment to embedding well-being and a commitment to creating the space and place for that to happen within our communities. How that kind of fits in my role, well, my role is fairly new, so it's a new role, at least in our institution. I'm mental health programs officer, and I'm embedded within a faculty as opposed to being a central student service. And my role is really kind of twofold. I do a lot of capacity building, so training and education, largely with faculty, staff, and graduate students. So going into departments, understanding kind of departmental cultures and needs, and tailoring resources for them, as well as sharing kind of broader community resources. And through that process, also building up a rapport and establishing myself as a point of connection. So the other part of my role is kind of systems navigation work. And so faculty, staff, students can reach out to me when they're concerned about someone, so that they don't feel that they have to have the sole responsibility of caring for someone when they recognize something that is potentially concerning around mental health, or is definitely concerning around mental health. Knowing that there's someone that they can reach out to very quickly, that they've got a rapport with, and ask questions and get some support. I think that's a big part of what we can do, making sure that we have folks that faculty in particular can turn to and lean on, so that they're not shouldering all of the responsibility for caring for the well-being of the students in their courses, which isn't their role.
Thank you very much, Chad. And I can certainly say from doing some part-time faculty work, having someone like you to sort of go directly to when the semester starts rolling, and even before that, would be a huge, huge benefit. Andrew, I'm going to pass it over to you to comment on what was previously said, but also thinking about hypothetically, if you were going to be running a faculty orientation program with your areas of expertise, what would you prioritize in emphasizing to sort of ingrain in them in terms of sort of building this sort of mentality and in terms of focusing on mental health and wellness on campuses?
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that question, especially about faculty and what they should be learning, I've thought about it quite a bit, and I have a lot of great ideas. I don't think I have enough time to talk about all those. I think I want to reflect what everybody else is saying first,
Sure.
and that this is a holistic approach. This, you have to be, we are a campus community with faculty, staff, students, postdoctoral scholars. We're all part of this community, and it has to be this holistic and a community approach. I think what we need to do at a broad level is to really embed mental health within all aspects of campus life for everybody, right? Whether that be in teaching, learning, curriculum, and all the things that we do on campus, mental health has to be, and well-being has to be embedded within that. I think as my role, I think I do a lot in trying to connect all these pieces together, whether it be student wellness, staff wellness, faculties, and kind of working at that at a broad level. But really to address your question, Chris, I think faculty members, if, well, personally, I think it goes beyond when they, or it goes before when they become faculty members.
Okay.
When they're grad students, for example. I don't think we have time to talk about that, but I think we really need to instill the importance of mental health when students are at the graduate level, so that they're the next crop of teachers or instructors and professors. But if I were to really think about how I would prepare faculty members to support student mental health and their own mental health, I think every faculty member should really understand how to ask, support, refer, and follow up with students. I know I'm hearing a lot from faculty members that they're having students come to them and they might be in distress. So how do I, listen, support them, refer them to proper resources? Again, knowing all campus resources is so important. Knowing accommodations and what they should be doing is important. And, giving faculty members skills to support their own mental health is so important. And there's so many different programs and resources out there that they can use. I'll just leave it at that, right? Those are some of the most important things, I think.
No, thank you very much. That was great. And Cecilia, to round off topic number one, I'm just wondering if there is something in particular that one of our other three panelists mentioned or spoke to that you want to sort of elaborate on or follow up on.
I think that one of the things that really hit for me again and again was this whole campus approach. And I think that that's so important when we're thinking the entire campus environment and what we want it to look like. And I think for me, sort of a mentally healthy environment is one where everyone is comfortable seeking the supports that they need because those supports exist for them in the first place. So again, kind of hitting back to what's already been mentioned about an institution that's supportive of these things and it's coming from a top-down approach. And then also one where the campus culture isn't just accepting of mental health, but open to talking about it. Because I think that those two things are quite a bit different in terms of what they get at when we're looking at sort of having this healthy campus environment when it comes to mental health. So those are some of the pieces that I would just touch on very quickly, but I think our panelists have really sort of hit on quite a few of the big pieces already.
Absolutely. I feel like we just hit the ground running on that one. So that's great. For the next topic we're going to shift to, I'm actually going to pass the moderator duty over to Cecilia, and we're going to be talking about the role of faculty on campus.
So now on the second point that we're looking at, we're going to speak to the fact that increasingly students are building a rapport with faculty members and support staff and often turning to them for perspective, guidance, and advice in times of need. So with that being said, I want to pose the first question, which is, have you noticed this trend in your own practice? And I'm going to start with you, Chad.
So have I noticed that faculty are being leaned on more by students? And yes, absolutely. And I think that's wonderful. I think it speaks to the rapport that faculty are able to build with their students, and ultimately their they're kind of the core touch point that our students have with our institutions, and kind of shape their experiences. And so, yeah, absolutely. I'm seeing lots of this, and I'm thrilled by it. But I also know that forming those connections requires a lot of time and energy on the part of faculty. And that, there's also value in thinking about and establishing boundaries around what that looks like. And being able to recognize, what are the common resources that I know about and am knowledgeable that I can, offer to students and facilitate, and where do I need to say, I care about your well-being, you're important, but I'm not the person who's best positioned to help you with this. There are folks who have greater expertise or knowledge in our campus, and I want to be the person who can help connect you with those folks. And to make those connections to folks like myself and our student services and all the other kind of supports that are available.
Next, I'm going to pass things to Michael, and I'm going to kind of build off a little on what Chad mentioned, Michael, when I asked you this first question, and then add on to it when thinking about that boundaries piece that was mentioned. In your particular roles on your campus, how would you define a healthy relationship with your student in terms of boundaries or other pieces like that?
Thank you, Cecilia. That's a very important question that we all kind of wrestle with on a daily basis. Thinking back, I have to agree, yes, in the past 15 years, we do see a lot of increase in terms of students coming to visit faculty members talking about their mental health. I can't remember exactly the citation, but I remember there was a study being done, I believe it was in 2019, looking in the past 15 years, they find out there been a 10% or 10% increase of staff of student members coming and seeking support from faculty members. So it's not just anecdotal, but actually they've been a survey and study to look at those as well. True, I mean, my experience is actually there are more and more students coming to talk about mental health issues with faculty members, especially if faculty members are open to talk about that. And my belief is oftentimes we as faculty members need to create a safe space for students to talk about it. If we actually see mental health is one of the integral component of the learning process. But back to the notion of boundary issue, I agree. I think sometimes this is a very treacherous land to walk along. On one hand, I have to be very mindful of myself being a faculty member as well. Student coming to see me as a student, obviously there is a power difference in there. But at the same time, when students come to speak to me about their well-being issue, it's not about me as a faculty, but rather it's about finding a space that they can talk about their concern. So it's a shift of my role and a shift of the dynamics as well. So at that point, I will go back and to think about my discussion earlier that talks about the sense of community. So when I really see ourselves as part of a larger community, that we all support each other to grow and to support students to achieve their goals, then I will argue and say that true, yes, I do have my role and capacity as a faculty members, and there are boundaries that I need to make sure. But at the same time, I'm also there to reach out and to support them and to be an authentic person to care for their needs as well. I have to admit, in fact, I mean, the word authentic being is a very nebulous term, and I think it's open for interpretation as well. But I think in fact, for me, I would try to kind of be as authentic as I am and to be genuine in supporting my students when they come and want some space to talk about their well-being. I guess I'll leave it here, and if times allow, maybe in the future, we can come back and talk about a little bit more about that as well.
Absolutely. So next, I'm going to be passing it to Andrew. And Andrew, I think sort of building on these first two pieces and talking about if you've noticed these trends and what a healthy relationship with students is for you, I wanted to highlight a piece that Michael had brought up around this being a very integral component, and was wondering if you had any thoughts around if or are there any modifications that need to be done to the role of faculty members to actually allocate the time to do this integral work?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. You know, so I'm going to answer a question, but not answer it, and I'm going to answer it in a different way. I think what we need to do is a couple of components, I think, is to change the culture of what campuses and especially certain institutions view about teaching and the importance of teaching. Teaching is so important at universities, at colleges, at all post-secondaries. But I think in some certain, sort of for research-intensive institutions, teaching is given less priority, isn't as viewed as on par with research. I think that has to change. Teaching is so important and has to be made important. As well, I think we need to change how we conceive student success. Student success is not just getting good grades, having student retention, having students graduate, but it's well-being, right? Student well-being needs to be part of this student success equation. I think if we really think about those two components and change those two components, I think this will allow faculty members to be to focus more on student well-being, to allocate more time to address student needs in the sense that we're talking about, and not just about being a teacher that tries to transfer the knowledge, marks papers, and things like that, and trying to convey the knowledge. But I think if we change those cultural pieces, it might have an impact on how faculty members view students, and then this will better support student mental health. So again, I'm kind of answering your question, but not really. But I think those two cultural pieces are very necessary.
And I think you're hitting at something that's quite important, that it's not just necessarily the role of faculty that needs to change, but there's actually a need for a culture change around them to actually support any changes that they might make. Absolutely. So we've got one more question in this topic. So I'm going to throw things back to Chris to touch on this next one.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Let me just shift this slide forward. Okay. Shifting to thinking about the learning environment. So within our toolkit, there's a statement: the learning environment consists not only of the physical or virtual space where learning takes place, but also the educational approach and conditions for learning cultivated by the faculty member and program of study. So with this in mind, thinking about more so now curriculum and the student experience, how would you define optimal conditions for healthy and engaged teaching and learning? So if you're thinking and putting yourself in the student's perspective, and maybe Cecilia, I could even start with you on this one.
I think this is a really good question. And when I'm thinking about sort of optimal conditions, I think we're often thinking about like the optimal conditions for the students. But when I thought of this question, when you first sort of were looking at it, I was thinking about faculty and the idea that, are they feeling supported enough to actually do some of this cultivating work? Like, do they have the supports that they need to be in the right mental state to actually be able to do some of this building out for their students? And if not, how can we start to connect with them to figure out what resources are needed there? Because I think if there isn't that foundational piece of the faculty member being ready to do this work, we can't even really approach the piece of creating this environment for students and their learning.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think in a later part of the webinar, when we talk about considerations for full-time and part-time faculty, I definitely have some thoughts on what you just said that I'll hold for now. Michael, if I were to ask you then how you've been at times maybe successful when you've tried to create this optimal learning environment versus times when maybe it hasn't worked so well, what were the factors at play that allowed or facilitated that to happen?
Yeah, I think this is a very challenging but needed to discuss question. And I agree with you totally, Cecilia, that when we think about like the optimal environment, I think we need to be very mindful in thinking of like the support for faculty members as well. Oftentimes we shift our attention and focus on our student, which is like brilliant. That is critical. But at the same time, my belief is without the well-being, if the faculty member doesn't have the well-being, it's going to be very difficult and challenging for us to create the supportive and the optimal learning environment. I think, I mean, looking at my day-to-day practice and also looking at one of the studies that we have done a couple of years ago with the students at UBC, we identified that motivating students and supporting them so that they really see kind of the learning are relevant and meaningful to them is a significant factor to enhance their well-being. So how can we as faculty members engage them in the learning process so that the learning is not just only shoving knowledge to their head, but rather is something that really kind of address their well-being as well as their own value is something very significant. Going beyond just reading the textbook and knowing how to write for the exam, but rather helping them to see in fact these are the knowledge that I treasure that would be helpful for me and would enable me to grow further. I think that is a very critical piece to enable students to have the well-being. And also the other point that we also figure out is, which I actually alluded to a little bit earlier already, is how to create a sense of connections and sense of community. When we did the study with the students, I mean, again and again, very loud and clear, we hear them saying that we need a supportive learning environment. We want to be able to connect with our peers. But at the same time, interesting, they also mentioned that in fact, we want to see you faculty members as part of our community as well, which I thought in fact is very loud and clear and critical and important. And that loops back to what you've been saying, Cecilia, earlier, that yes, we need to think about the well-being of students. At the same time, we need to think about the well-being and the support that faculty members are receiving to enable us to create this safer and supportive environment.
That's great. Thank you so much, Michael. And Andrew, I'm happy to pass it along to you, keeping in mind that we're going to be transitioning into more specific questions on supporting faculty on what Cecilia and Michael just mentioned there.
Yeah, I don't have too much to add other than I think I want to underscore that when we talk about the learning environment, I think it's important to acknowledge that this learning environment happens at different levels, and that so we have to address, when we're interacting with students or in the classroom or the online environment, we're going to address faculty well-being. We're going to, again, address well-being at different points within campus life. Again, it's this holistic approach, right? If we just address it within one aspect in the learning environment with students, that's great. But if you don't address it in policies, processes, or procedures, it's not going to, have that wholesale change or cultural shift, or all those impacts that we're looking for if we don't do it at the holistic level.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think it's a great time to shift into our next topic, which is going from the conceptual, theoretical, or maybe even idealistic views we might have on what needs to be done or what could help in achieving these goals, to actually talking about a few pragmatic considerations. So the statement here reads, it has been shown that one of the main factors contributing to student mental health, and we did talk about this, is the support of faculty. Having robust institutional supports lets faculty members know they are valued and that their mental health also does matter. So with this in mind, which is a little bit of a reiteration, Chad, I want to start with you. And specifically, maybe you can just really highlight how your role fits into this equation. Pragmatically thinking, what types of environmental supports, so concrete things, are most beneficial in your view or in your experience for faculty members?
I think front of mind for me are having access to supports, both within kind of the academic communities and departments, and also within kind of the faculty level and institutional level. Understanding how to navigate a system and who they can reach out to for support in doing that. I think it would be wonderful if all faculty members were able to know who they could fire off a quick email to and say, I've got a student struggling with finances, what resources might I share with them? And have someone else kind of do some of that legwork and get back to them, so that our faculty don't have to be keepers of all the knowledge of all the things that are available. I would also say that being able to support faculty in managing their own mental health, right? Someone that they can reach out to and say, I'm having, I'm struggling. I'd like to get connected with some supports. I'm not sure what's available for me, and I'm mindful of my colleagues and if there are repercussions, and having someone who can play a systems navigator role for them as well as our students.
That's great. And within your role as a mental health program officer, are there concrete programs you have in place with faculty to sort of guide them through these steps, or is that something that's sort of gradually being worked on to implement? Or
I mean,
Just curious.
Yeah, no, it's gradually being worked on. Right now, though, kind of establishing kind of myself and my director, who's responsible for faculty support as well as mental health, as folks that they can reach out to, and knowing that we kind of are the experts in that system navigation, and we understand the challenges of accessing care within our institutional systems as well as in our communities, and that we can help do some of that legwork.
That's great. Thank you very much. Andrew, earlier on, you mentioned the things that faculty can best do, and you sort of had a number of specific topics you said can be most beneficial to help them identify and work through student mental health issues in the classroom. I'm just wondering if you've worked within your own campus environment or elsewhere to actually implement some training protocols in that area and what they look like.
Sorry, I'm the first one to speak with their thing unmuted or unmuted, so
No problem.
I win that, I guess. So to address your question, we've been doing lots of trainings across different post-secondaries. We've done a lot of good work for students. I think faculty is a little bit trickier in the sense of a couple of things. I think as faculty members, I would like trainings that are a little bit more evidence-based, right? Research intensive. So I think trainings that are have that evidence base behind it are important, and trainings that resonate also with the faculty context and culture. I think faculty members are a little bit different in the sense that you can't take a workplace training and apply it to faculty, and we do this on our campus. We have workplace trainings and we apply it to faculty members. Generally, they resonate. We have general mental health trainings, but I think given the specific context of faculty members in the sense that they are maybe, view themselves as independent contractors in a sense, or that, we are different in the sense that we apply for grants or publish research, and how does that fit there's academic culture. So I think trainings have to be tailored specifically towards faculty. I don't think we're there yet as well. Another, I think, thing that we have to consider when thinking about training is level of engagement. Not all faculty members are as engaged as we are here on the panel, or people who might be viewing the webinar. We like everybody to be, but I think we have to make training specific to different levels of engagement, right? I think there are people who are very engaged. They would take assist training, which is 2 days of long commitment. They might even want to be trainers in that. But there are other faculty members that might not be as interested. So I think we have to be there to meet their needs. So whether I think a minimal level of engagement is under, reflecting what Chad has said, all faculty members should understand resources that exist on campus and know how to refer to them. I think minimally, that's what all faculty members should do. I think if we can meet people where they're at, I think that's a good thing. And if we can do more of that, I think that would generate more uptake within faculty members.
Absolutely. And actually you made an interesting point, because you said, how do faculty members, and there's not one size fits all, how do they view themselves in the context of their teaching role or their role within the institution? So what I'm wondering is, from your perspectives, well, let's think about this whole delineation between, full-time faculty members of different standings versus part-time faculty members who may be just teaching one course at a single institution, or teaching a couple of courses spread across a couple of different institutions. What considerations need to be made in terms of that navigation and relationship management piece with faculty members of different standings? Michael, what are your thoughts?
Very good point. Actually, I'm just looking at the chat box in here, and actually this is like reflecting as to exactly what, Francis, you're talking about in here. Time is a very important factor, and often unwilling to give up time. And we know, as a matter of fact, doing all these kind of things does take up a lot of time, and even receiving support to feel competent in addressing student well-being does take up a lot of time as well. and there's no doubt about it. And this is even more challenging for part-time faculty members, and in particular running between the multiple institutions as well. Imagine if one person have to deal with like multiple demands, and at the same time try to shift from one organizational environment or institutional environment to another one with different set of like rules and regulations and policies and practice, and you have to be flexible enough to shift your mind quickly to adjust to different way of operation and different ethos. No doubt, I mean, this is very demanding, and this is actually taxing up very much the bandwidth of faculty members as well. And given right now, I'm sure that many of you will resonate the same thing as well. Sitting in front of a computer for 12 hours a day, speaking to different groups of students and meetings, and you wonder as to, now the next hour, who am I speaking with? I'm still sitting on the same chair, facing the same computer terminal, but who's my new audience group, and how should I frame and present myself appropriately to this particular audience group? So this is a big, big challenge. Not sure that I have a solution to the audience, but I guess I'm just kind of picking up more questions for folks to really think about. No doubt, actually, this is a very challenging questions that we need to think about. Before I leave, I just quickly mention one thing is, in the past couple of years, we established a communal of practice for faculty members. Unlike folks been talking about like some of the system supports, we try to do some grassroots support as well. So for faculty members who are interested but feel like very exhausted, in particular some of the part-time faculty members, sessional instructors, we try to create that kind of like very grassroots support so that we can get together, talk about some of our concern, try to explore, share our experience, and try to move along, so that faculty members will not really feel like I'm alone, I'm all by myself. But integrating that kind of support into our day-to-day interaction, realizing I don't really have to go to a particular training program, but I just drop off an email to my COP that I can bounce up an idea and see, hey, by the way, can someone help me? Oh, by the way, I got a brilliant idea. Someone like to pick that up? So we try to do something along that like lower profile, but integrated approach as well.
Oh, thank you very much. And while you're talking, I'm thinking about my experience when I started doing some part-time faculty work, and everything happened so fast the first semester where it was just like, I felt like I was just trying to keep like 1 week ahead of the students. And it was a great thing because, you know, working in a college postgraduate environment, it's a pretty intimate group, and they bring in faculty members who are actively working in a relevant industry, and the students love having that discourse and dialogue to be like, hey, what's it going to be like? How's it going to look when I get into the workplace? But it definitely can also feel from the faculty experience, at least in my books, that you're sort of on an island as a part-time faculty member where you're just sort of like, okay, I have my class, and I know that I go to this class every week and I show up on campus and I do that, or I'm doing it virtually now. And then I'm sort of like moving on to the rest of my life. And it does feel at times quite disconnected. So I'm just going to throw it quickly back to Chad, just to see what your experience is with trying to work both with the full-time on campus, like 100% of the time faculty versus the lesser, part-time group.
So my experiences with both groups are that both groups are really appreciative of having someone and having made a connection. I think that onboarding piece that you mentioned and trying to just stay one step ahead is very real for folks who are sessional instructors or part-time instructors. And they often don't have the communities of practice that Michael was talking about, that they may not yet be plugged into those spaces where you have all that kind of informal support and where people share resources, and being able to reach out to those folks and introduce yourself and facilitate a connection to those communities as well as to the resources that you may make available, I think goes a long way and has been super well received.
Great, thank you very much. Cecilia, just wondering if you have any final thoughts. I know you've been patiently listening there, so I'd love to hear if you have any final thoughts before we move on.
I think the only thing that I really want to touch on is that, especially when we're considering part-time faculty, and it's already been mentioned, but just really want to like re-highlight it, is that crunch for time and being realistic about what you can expect in terms of ability to commit to training or all these other pieces, and also thinking about, especially if you're considering folks who work between different institutions, how can we be flexible with them? For instance, if they've taken a training in one space and it's very similar to something that you offer in your space, being able to be lenient about that and trying to understand that they may already have the skill set and may not have the time to commit to redoing similar trainings and things like that. So I just really want to highlight that time piece, because we're so lucky to have these folks giving parts of their days to educate our students, and just wanting to be mindful of that they're actually giving up this time to really try and contribute to this community.
Yeah, very, very well said.
So can I pick up on the time piece? Just one quick point about the time piece. Again, we're all short for time. I think what we got to do is make things easy for faculty members, instructors, part-time instructors. It's not all up on the instructors to do this, right? As departments or faculties, we got to do this too, right? So one thing, for example, we're doing is to create well-being check-ins at the department and faculty level. So we send out these well-being check-ins that are posted to D2L. We have created resources and slides that faculty members can post on their, before the class or after class. I think we're starting to think about other resources like videos that they can play within classroom, right? Again, these are simple, easy things that they can insert into their classwork or curriculum that will be impactful, but yet they don't have to spend the time to do it.
And just quickly before we move on, Andrew, what's your sense on how well those are being engaged with and received since you've implemented them?
Yeah, for example, the well-being check-ins have been quite well received. And actually students have come up and said to, advisors, whoever, I saw those well-being check-ins and I've sought help because of it, right?
Okay. And would it be easier for people who are listening or watching this webinar to go to a resource or webpage link to sort of see how that process has been implemented on your end, or to reach out for any further information if they're going to try to bring that into their environment?
Yeah, some of those resources, those well-being check-ins have been posted on our Campus Mental Strategy website, and you can contact me as well. We can, for sure, I'm happy to lend out any resources or chat about it.
Okay, great. Maybe I'll try to get that link to the campus mental health landing page from you that I can send out to all attendees after the fact.
Could I add one more thought, Chris?
I guess so, Chad. Go ahead.
I appreciate it. Doing it anyways.
Yeah, go for it.
This idea of meeting faculty or instructors where they're at and working with kind of what resources and capacity, personal capacity they have at any given moment. I think often, in talking about what are the pieces that you can kind of set and forget. What are those things that we can work with you to provide you so that you just put them into place. You don't need to think about them over the course of the term, but they're continuously there for students. And having conversations around effort and personalization. And that, yes, in a dream world with infinite resources, we would be able, instructors would be able to do all those high effort tasks that are also incredibly personalized to their students. But sometimes it's about those kind of low effort, not personalized, generic links being added to your course shells, adding resources to email signatures. Again, those things that convey that you care even when you don't have the time to do these highly detailed, personalized forms of outreach to our students.
That's a huge thing, and probably something that goes under the radar in terms of a little bit of an investment at the beginning of your planning phase that's then going to help mitigate any things in week 7, 8, 9 of the semester when things get really heavy for not just the students, but the faculty who are caught up in grading and trying to think of new ways to stimulate the students because things have maybe gotten a little bit stale after a few weeks. Like it's such a good point and something that hopefully we get more Chads across institutions to help implement those practices on a wider scale. So yeah, thank you very much for that. Okay. It looks like we're going to have time probably to touch on one last topic. So this last one is mentioned in our toolkit quite extensively, and it's the concept of intersectionality in curriculum design. So a definition to provide intersectionality is that it's a means of assessing how different forms of inequality operate together and exacerbate each other. An intersectional approach is one that takes into account the context of people's lives with regard to their identities and shapes programs based on their needs, capacities, and experiences. So there is increasing discussion about intersectionality in curriculum design. So the first question I have for you is, how do you think the utilization of intersectionality can benefit the experience for both faculty and students? And Cecilia, why don't we start with you this time around?
Okay, I can for sure start off. I think that when we're sort of looking at how it can benefit both faculty and students, I think that on one hand, the benefit for, I think, the students is that it takes into, like, this whole method takes into account the experiences that they bring to the table from their own lives. And I think that's just something that makes them feel not only that they are being heard and being seen as people, but also that they feel as if they're sort of being brought into their community or their educational institution and being valued in that space, because that space actually values their stories and their experiences. But then on the flip side for faculty, whether you're a tenured faculty or an instructor, full-time, part-time, you're getting a better understanding of your students when you're taking the time to sort of take into account their stories and the different things that they're sharing with you, and also building that trust with your students when you're doing this work, because you're showing them that, hey, I care about you and your experience and what you bring to the table in this course, and I want to understand how we can build on that together and how we can learn from that together. And I think that helps you to connect better with them, but also just to get to know them as people. And I think that's really beneficial for faculty to actually have that connection with their students in a way that's a little bit more granular.
Oh, that was very, very well said. So thank you very much. And I think that really helps probably give a more concrete understanding of what this concept even is for people who are maybe new to hearing the term intersectionality in curriculum design. Michael, I'm wondering, what's your perspective on how we can take this definition given here and translate it into some pragmatic considerations for faculty in the classroom or when they're sort of thinking about building their courses?
Thank you, actually, Cecilia. I think that you pave a very good and solid ground for us to think about what's the actual meaning of intersectionality, in particular, thinking in terms of like curriculum design and course design as well. I think we need to be very mindful of like bringing our students to the table of discussion, giving them like opportunities to share their thoughts and opinions, as well as helping us as faculty members who are trying to design curriculums to be very mindful of like different contexts that the students are situating. In particular, I think right now, facing with COVID and facing with like rapid changing of technology and environmental situations, I mean, we are living in a more and more polarizing situation that we know, in fact, there are so many like environmental factors impacting on our students, as well as so much of the social determinants of health that impacting on our students' well-being. So we need to factor all those in when we think about like the curriculum design. One thing that we've been trying, and I'm sure that many of the faculty members sitting around here have done that, as well as like any of the curriculum designing people sitting around this conference have done that already, is try to bring students' voice to our deliberation process. We definitely, I mean, many of us have like students representatives sitting in our curriculum committee. But at the same time, at the granular level, when I'm trying to like launch and deliver my course, I mean, I intentionally ask students to come and tell me how you like it or how you like the course to be done. Even on the day one, when we are rolling out the course, we intentionally invite students saying, there are lots of rooms for you to give me feedback. There are lots of room that we can actually fine tune the design of the assignment so that it's not just only a piece of things to track your mark, but rather frame it as an opportunity for you to learn something in your own personal context to support and to satisfy your own personal need of learning as well. That being said, I have to confess, this is again time consuming and taxing heavy on faculty members. But I think at the same time, this is very rewarding. By the end of the day, you realize, yes, actually students are satisfied with what they are learning from you. They are much more in a better shape. And likewise, for me as a faculty member, I feel like I've way much less stress to explain to students, what are you supposed to be doing? And thou shalt not do whatever in your assignment, because this is my assignment, not the student assignment. So it's a big payoff at the beginning, but by the end, you feel like, oh, this is so much easier in terms of the teaching perspective. So I'll shut up from here.
No, I really appreciate it. And two things I thought of while you were talking. One is how vital the whole concept of rapport building and relationship building is, particularly early on in the semester, whenever you're working with students to sort of help them realize that you're also there to sit and learn from them and learn who they are as people, and realize that, it's a stop on a journey for all of us, right, in the classroom. And to me, that also sort of takes a little bit of the burden off identifying as a faculty member with like having to be the expert all the time, and realizing, like, especially with students who are maybe at a maybe a little bit later stage of life, who have been through some different experiences and are maybe returning to study, which a lot of our students do, particularly in the college system, that they have a lot to offer us in terms of experiences, career experiences, life experiences, but also perspectives of where they come from in life. And to me, that makes it more like going into each week as a faculty member, but also as someone who's going to come and learn and sort of have some unexpected fun conversations while we talk about our content and curriculum, and maybe just not focusing on how can I load as much readings and assignments on my students as possible, but maybe taking the foot off the gas pedal there a little bit to build in some more of that stuff. I say we have a couple more minutes, so I would like to open it up, Chad or Andrew, for some final thoughts on this topic, if you have any. So maybe Chad, we could start with you. If not, you can pass it along to Andrew.
Happy just to give something short and sweet so we can create some space for questions, but kind of riffing off of what Michael was saying, that intersectionality approach isn't solely on the instructors and the development of their courses. We need to be thinking about taking an intersectional approach to the delivery of our student services, to all the administrative processes that our students have to engage with, so that their whole experience takes in their whole person.
Thank you very much for that. Before we move over to the questions, Andrew, any final thoughts?
Yeah, just the one final thought is, just listening to everybody talk about this topic, I think a course would be so much more interesting if we talked about intersectionality and all these complexities that exist within our culture, whatever, right? I'd rather be in a course like that than a course that didn't talk about that, right? So I think this really is another viewpoint about it. It's just such a richer and more fulfilling course on the student level if we did discuss things like that.
Yeah, very well said, because you think about when we were students and what do we really remember from each course, right? Is it the granular textbook information as much as the conversations and the connections of thoughts and ideas? And so, yeah, thank you very much for that. It is 1:55, and we'll set aside the rest of the time for questions. The webinar does officially end at 2, but I have built in a few extra minutes that it will stay open in case we want to try to tackle a couple of them. I'm just going to start going through some sequential questions. Some of them we might have already touched on a little bit, so I'll let you guys just sort of maybe do a final quick note on those ones, and we'll work through them. So I have a question here from Melissa Fernandez, who says, what are the ways you are supporting faculty in supporting students, specifically when our staff EFAP plans do not always cover all faculty members, for example, sessional, adjunct, etc.? So I think we did touch on those a little bit, but I don't know if anyone has any sort of final thoughts just to contribute to that in terms of tangible supports. Feel free to list off a couple of them.
I take the point that Melissa's making. I think being able to be system navigators, not just of campus resources, but also resources in the community that folks can access through public health, and working with those individuals to find kind of low cost, no cost, or sliding scale cost options is work that I think we can embrace in our support roles.
Okay, absolutely. Thank you very much, Chad. Anyone else before we move on? Okay. A second question. So there's actually a couple of statements that we could potentially give feedback or comments to. So two things. One, when talking about mental health, I'm challenged by your optimism because faculty and support staff are not trained sufficiently. When real crises, directing the learner may feel like they are being passed around like a hot potato. So that's the first thought. Also, so point number two, time-consuming emotional labor often falls to biracial people of color, women, and other communities who must sacrifice time as opposed to investing time further into professional performance. And the emotional labor has its cost, and there are not supports for these faculty in need. So two different thoughts there. does anyone want to sort of provide a thought or perspective, whether it be on point number 1 or point number 2?
I think I would like to talk about point number 2 a little bit.
Okay.
You know, and I want to address specifically, you know, faculty members having multiple roles. So in addition to teaching, research, some faculty members, specific groups are called to support, whether it be supporting students or supporting even faculties or colleagues, right? I think something that can help enhance that in some way is actually thinking about what we value as, you know, criteria for tenure even, or criteria for service, right? If we expand what we view service, for example, as, you know, sitting on a committee, to things like supporting students or faculty or staff or colleagues, I think that would have an impact in giving more recognition, you know, allowing faculty members or instructors to allow more time for those things. I think if we, you know, kind of show recognition and reward for those types of behaviors, I think that will go a long ways in changing some of these things.
Thank you very much, Andrew. Does anyone else want to elaborate on that?
I echo Andrew's sentiment, and I agree in a way that currently right now the promotion and tenure system doesn't really recognize the effort that faculty members put in terms of supporting student well-being. In the ideal world, it will be fantastic if these factors are being built in. I mean, that being said, I have to admit, with us at UBC, we are moving a little bit ahead in this spectrum, and we're trying to acknowledge the teaching as a way for faculty members to move up the promotional ladder. I want to get to Mark's first question here, which he talks about the mental health is kind of being a more kind of smaller group of people kind of feeling more comfortable dealing with it, but not everybody. And I think that alluded to the importance of mental health literacy amongst the whole community. It's not just only a few people know about like the importance of mental health, but I think it's important that building in the mental health literacy as part of the newer staff members or faculty members orientation process, so that people feel more comfortable with some of the mental health language and some of the issues that faculty members might be facing with, just like we all know about like how to do CPR, or at least know about like what is a heart attack. I think in fact we should know about what is a mental health issues that our students will be facing with somehow.
Yeah, thank you very much.
If I could just add on.
Absolutely.
Also, like, I think having conversations around opportunity versus obligation can be really helpful. And acknowledging that there's, you know, when we recognize that someone may be struggling, there are opportunities there to check in, to play a support role, to be a facilitator to resources, but that there are times where we have obligations, and embedding and better understanding of where are opportunities versus where are obligations as part of faculty training, I think would be really valuable. And with respect to the kind of hot potato comment, absolutely. I think that's a real thing that I've had lots of students express to me. That and the I receive the same 5 resources in an email list all the time. And the counter narrative to that though is that the students I talk to who have been from resource to resource as they find their way to the right one, but where they have experiences where they feel cared for in those interactions, they don't mind. They see that there's someone who's willing to help them get connected. And so being able to say, you know, I'm sorry, what you're going through is really challenging and difficult, and you're deserving of support and care. And I'd like to help get you to someone who can provide that. That goes a long way to mitigating that feeling of being bounced around like a ping pong.
Oh, thank you very much. And maybe Chad, I'll hold this next question for you, since you sort of mentioned that. There's an audience member who would love to hear how folks have pivoted in this work. So thinking about supportive process and feeling cared for in terms of, you know, resource allocation, but also sort of guiding students through this journey. How have you pivoted to facilitate this in the online environment?
In my role, it's, you know, we've moved over to webinars. We've started thinking about, we're spending a lot more time talking about what does it look like to recognize someone who may be struggling via email communication, knowing that so much of the interaction is happening through email and through discussion boards. and how do you go about structuring your responses so that students are feeling heard and cared for in that, and making myself available as a resource as well. Within the classroom setting, it looks really different, and it's dependent on what an instructor or faculty member is willing to do. And I love to advocate for scaling back a little on the curriculum to create space for connection, for group work that involves breakout rooms and getting to know peers in the classroom, and create those opportunities for relationships with others. Those pieces that are often missed out on as a result of our kind of online learning.
Great, thank you very much. One last question, and this will be sort of a quick one to wrap things up, but I'll merge two questions together that I'm seeing. So essentially it covers off that some faculty members do have a hard time with change and see mental health support as under the domain of student services. So how do we delicately help to shift this perspective, or work with these faculty to maybe shift that perspective? Or how do we engage faculty members who don't see supporting student mental health as part and parcel of their role? Does anyone want to sort of take the lead on this one?
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts on this one. I think one thing, I mentioned this before, is to redefine what student success is, right, at the university level. Student success is not just about imparting knowledge, getting good grades, retention, graduation. It's beyond that. It's more holistic than that, right? It's student well-being is part of that. And as instructors, we affect that, right? Or we impact that. So that's, I think, one thing. The second thing is, I think one of the messages that we've been trying to get across to faculty members is, we don't want you to be counselors. That's not what we're asking you to do. We want you to be a human being, right? How would you treat somebody at a, as a human being, right? Treat your students as a human being, and just be, a caring, community member, right? So I think that's the message. I don't know if it resonates or if it's getting through, but at least that's one message that we're trying to get through.
Great, thank you very much, Andrew. Cecilia?
I think one piece that I was just going to tack onto what Andrew said is, with sort of emphasizing those the messages that he mentioned, just meeting folks where they're at, and trying not to be judgmental about maybe where they're coming from if they don't necessarily yet see student mental health as part of their role. Really just meeting them where they're at, understanding them, and then providing the information as it's appropriate, and sort of building them hopefully to that place where they sort of where it clicks for them and they see, okay, maybe I see now where I fit, whereas I didn't before. So doing some of that, although it's slow and incremental, some of that work from the beginning of just understanding where they're coming from and building upon those messages that we're not asking you to be counselors. We just want you to be a little more understanding towards the people who are coming into your classrooms.
Yeah, that's a really great point. And I think a lot about how we've done a lot of work covering off peer-to-peer support systems that are implemented on campuses to help engage students in certain topics. And I think a peer-to-peer system also for faculty, including faculty champions who, people such as Michael or Andrew, who are not only experts in this area, but are champions of these causes to help relate to other faculty who see them as their peers, rather than maybe this coming down from administrators or student services or someone external to their sort of working group. I think that would be another great way to sort of round this sort of building engagement and buy-in out. So I think we should wrap it up there. It is 2:06, which we're a few minutes over schedule. But if there are any final thoughts, feel free for anyone to say a quick, last thought, sentence, or even word. If not, we'll wrap it up here, and I will be sending off a follow-up to all attendees, and I'll try to include a couple of resource links for everyone who is interested in following up with any of the work that Andrew or Michael have done on their campuses. All right. Seems like that wraps things up for today. So thank you all for this discussion. I really appreciate the time you put in, and thank you to everyone who took the time to be with us today. I know it's not always easy to carve out time for this, so we really do appreciate it.
Likewise, I just want to thank all the participants as well. I mean, there are lots of interesting thoughts and comments, and we'd love to engage further. So feel free to connect with us, and we'd love to continue with our conversation as well.
Yeah, and we would have loved to have talked about every possible topic under this domain, but we unfortunately only had an hour. There's so much more to discuss, and I did just put a poll question out to see what the next area of interest might be in this topic. So yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, please do tune in monthly. That would be great for our numbers.